Hello, adventurers. My name's Tyler.
And I'm Richard.
On today's episode, we're talking about Chapter 2 of Daggerheart's core rulebook. Welcome to True Strike.
Howdy, folks, and welcome back to the show.
Yo.
It's time for Chapter 2.
Yeah.
Playing an adventure.
I feel like you were walking into it, and I was like, me too, and I messed up the dialogue. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's fine.
I've ruined the flow already.
No, the flow
we got to
is
restart.
there. No. We're on to Chapter 2. That was part of Chapter 1, the flow.
We've moved on?
We've moved on.
Okay, we're in Chapter 2.
Actually, wait, no, hold on.
Wait.
The very first sentence is the flow.
Oh,
so we're on to the flow.
We've moved on to the flow.
This is going to teach you how.
Thank
this is
goodness.
going to...
I need it.
It's going to fix what you just did when you read
Please
this page.
fix me.
Yeah. So
Hi, everyone.
You're ruining the flow again.
I haven't read it yet.
But yes, hi everyone. Go for it.
That's all
No,
I
it's your
had.
turn. It's your
That's all
turn.
I had.
No, it's your
Don't
turn.
spotlight me.
It's the flow of the game.
You're using your fear.
I have narrated the details of the chapter opening.
You haven't really narrated much yet, I'll be honest. Not to, criticize too much. Hey, if you're here, you probably listened to our chapter 1. That was a very long episode. We're trying not to make this one as long. We're off to a very bad start.
It's probably going to be long-ish. It's not as long of a chapter, but there are things to talk about. And we might ramble on this one more than we did on the last one. I'm going to try not to get anything wrong this time.
Oh, yeah, we should go ahead and start with that one.
Things went wrong last time.
I highlighted it. We'll really get to it
you
later.
Highlighted it, yeah. I did misrepresent tag teaming.
Wow.
Yeah. I misread it on my cursory glance. It says each player, so I just assumed that each player paid the cost upon rereading it because, you guys did point that out. My bad.
Yep. I went through in the PDF, highlighted, once per session, each player can choose to spend 3 hope and initiate a tag team roll between their character and another. I also added a little bit that says Richard lied.
I didn't
so I wouldn't
lie.
forget.
I was just wrong. I was wrong. Lie
Is it one
implies that
the
it's
other?
malicious.
Oh, that's fair enough. Sure.
Yeah.
But how do we know it wasn't?
Well, you never will.
So like Richard mentioned, the beginning of this chapter is all about the flow of the game. To break that out in steps, it's step 1, the GM narrates the details. Step 2, the players and the GM ask each other questions back and forth. Step 3, the players and the GM answer those questions. Step 4, you choose and resolve actions, what you want to do and how you resolve it. Step 5, you repeat the cycle. And that's just how pretty much all TTRPGs go.
Yeah, that's pretty straightforward as far as like how most things are supposed to go.
Yep.
So this is just a way of like really layering things out so that they're making sure that people aren't going to be confused about how you're supposed to be playing, which is kind of like a theme for the next 2 chapters, I feel.
This book's really good at making sure you know what you're doing if you've never played a TTRPG before. Yeah.
Which I'm not saying that's a negative. I'm just saying that seems to be like a theme of these 2 chapters is that they are very in depth as far as covering things that you don't think about other books covering until you read it here, and then you realize that not many other books do this kind of coverage as far as explaining like how the flow of a game works, for example.
Yeah. Spoiler for next episode when I'm beating my head against the wall because I'm bored to death. Because I'm like, oh my goodness, I feel like I'm reading the same thing over and over again that I already know. It's because sometimes I am, and it's intentional. Because we happen to know some of the stuff going into it. But not everybody is
not
like that.
everybody is like that.
So it's not a fault to them at all. And anytime I'm like, oh man, I was bored here, it's not a bad thing. It's just the information that I could glance over instead of really like read, every word, like, some of this other stuff.
Yeah.
Well, so this was approximately 20 seconds that we turned into like 3 minutes already. So
I'm going to keep going on it really quick.
Oh my God.
Because they do something
we have
in
like
here.
60 pages to cover.
I know, but they do something in here that's going to happen throughout the rest of this chapter that I appreciate that I didn't see in other games that I've reviewed in the past year. And that is example interactions.
There was some example stuff in the up to the 2024 D&D stuff.
Yes, there were some in there.
Yes.
But like going back to other games, I won't name names, but there were other games that we have done that I have run for you guys that I struggled to find example interactions in because the rulings were not so precise.
Right.
So because they were obtuse, I had to try and figure out how to rule certain scenarios.
Interpretations.
And I had to find examples of play elsewhere, which I found some of them on Reddit, some of them in like some Facebook groups and stuff like that really laid out how things are supposed to go, that fixed the missing rules essentially. And this happens quite a few times in this chapter. So like, you know, the second page here of this, you know, next chapter, half of that page is just example interactions.
Yeah.
And again, we'll see this, you know, down the line too. So it is very helpful to have like a real world kind of explanation of how things might go to help you better grasp what they're talking about.
Dude, like a third of chapter 3 is like this.
Yes.
So they are not shy with using their example interactions, which is kind of cool. And like someone there got to stretch like a narrative muscle.
Yes.
While also like, you know, being in the confines of the rules and stuff. It's definitely interesting. But we're not going to be reading through those. If you've got the book, we definitely recommend, you know, checking those out because they are extremely informative in a way that you don't necessarily expect. Because when you see something used in practice, I don't know, it works for my brain better for sure.
No, for sure.
Next, they poke out the core mechanics, talking about the spotlight, which is essentially your, hey, it's your turn, or it's this person's turn, but with the whole free flow initiative system, you could, you know, I would say, replacement. In Daggerheart, spotlighting is just focusing on which character, adversary, or player is in charge of the scene at the moment.
Yeah, who's making the move.
Yep, who's making the move. It tells you basically everything you're going to do on your turn. It does mention there's an optional spotlight tracker, or for if you have tables where your players want a little bit more structure of knowing like, well, you know, how many more times can I go or something like that. Or I think more commonly when you have tables of players that are hogging the spotlight or ones that don't want to be in the spotlight but still want to play the game, it's kind of like, well, you've got 3 turns left in the spotlight, and the other 2 players across the table from you they've only got 1 left, you know, maybe, you know, use one of yours and kind of teach people how this system is meant to go. I don't know how many tables are going to use this long term. If any of you are, please let us know.
Oh yeah, I'd be interested to see who's actually going to use this rather than the standard free form.
Right.
That is supposed to be the norm of this system.
Yeah, because I know for sure, like that's how we're going to do it. It's just, you know, the standard back and forth, you know, norm, so to speak. But I don't want to discredit anyone else who might be using this because
it's valid.
And especially I want to know like why. Is it a preference of having the more structure, or is it the kind of people at your table? Just I'm honestly interested. It's also telling you about what making a move is. It's pretty much any action or something you would do if you're going to run up and, you know, make an attack, or if you're going to sprint from a long distance, or in a social instance, you know, you're going to go up and talk to somebody. These are all like making a move. Specifically, then they also bring up moves in combat, which I just mentioned, GM moves and adversary actions. That is the GM. If if the player rolls with fear or misses a ability or attack, the GM gets a free move. Essentially, they don't have to spend a fear, as the spotlight gets to shift to one of their adversaries. But then they can also use fear to make additional moves or do environmental abilities and things like that. Then they go into I'm going to throw it to you in a second, I promise. They go to the duality dice, explaining how the PCs have these 2 special dice. I say special because the GM doesn't get this, where they're going to have 2 D12s of different colors. You don't want to mix them up. You want to always be able to know what is your hope and which is your fear, and tells you how that's going to roll. And if you're coming from D&D or something like that, where your D20 is typically what you use for 99% of your rolls, this is duality dice in Daggerheart for you. You're going to be rolling 2d12, letting your GM know which rolled higher. So if your hope die is higher, and you add up the total, and it's like a 15 with hope, that's good. And if it's, 15 with fear, that can still be a success, but with some consequences. Same with, failures and things like that. If your duality dice ever roll the same on action rolls and things like that, that is a crit, even if it's 2 1s.
Yeah, even if it's 2 1s, 2 2s, any sames are going to be your crits.
Yep. So yeah, that's the biggest thing with the duality dice there. They also go into how hope works, what you're going to use it for. Because when you roll with hope, you're going to gain a hope. Each PC can have a max of 6 hope ever. Like that's where you're capping out. So you are going to want to be using hope. Don't be hoarding hope.
Yeah, no, and we saw that in our beta playing of this game, that we had players that were hoarding hope,
half the table,
not sure when to use it, not wanting to use it, because you get to that thing where it's like having inspiration, where like I want to save this inspiration for when I think I'm really going to need it.
This is video game logic of having the items,
and never holding on to all those health potions and then never using them by the end of the game. Yeah, no, so it's very important. I like that they stress like the usage of hope should be something that is like a norm in this game.
In theory, every other roll-ish, you should be getting at least a hope back.
Yeah.
So you don't want to be stockpiling all the way up to 6 and then just sitting there on your little hope hoard, because your hoard's not getting any bigger. So some of the things you can do is you can spend a hope and help an ally. You can utilize an experience to increase your roll. You can initiate tag team rolls, which is only 3 for you to initiate. That's important.
Only 3. Only 3.
You can activate hope features, which every class has. Each unique hope features that are super, super cool, and they can shift the power of the moment in the PC's favor. It's rad stuff. You want to take over for fear?
Yeah, so they also touch on to fear. So when you're rolling your duality dice, if you roll with fear, even if you succeed, that fear then shunts over to your game master, and then your game master gains that fear, which there'll be a lot more detail as far as like the super in-depth fear usage when we get to chapter 3. But basically, that fear is what your GM is going to do to make their own moves. So to like spotlight an adversary like in the middle of a combat, so the GM can interrupt the flow of things and say like, oh, well, before you do your turn, I'm going to spend this fear to go ahead and take my turn. And it could be anything from like spotlighting an adversary to changing an environment or adding some extra elements into the scene.
Using special abilities of the adversaries
of it. Yeah. So fear is a very versatile thing. So it's also a thing that you should probably be using as a GM too, because you don't want to just hoard it all and keep it behind, which is looming over everybody's head.
Sort of. Right? Because a GM can build up to 12.
Yes.
And if you're the type of GM that is publicly, showing your fear, then building that up is just letting the fear well up in your players. And there's definitely going to be moments for that, like cinematic moments of as they're getting to what they assume is going to be a conflict, right? And as the fear just wells and you kind of maybe use one here or there, and you get right up before like a big fight and they're on their way through, and maybe they have to go through over like a narrow passageway, and you use a fear to cause an environmental effect, and there's a cave in, and you've split the party, and half the party is about to run into the big bad of the scene, and now a combat starts. The rest have to get over, and the whole time you're hammering on the party. Now you're using your fear, and it's just you're like that fear literally is coming back to bite them, and you could have some cool moments. And like you mentioned, when we get chapter 3, we'll discuss some of the ways
more in depth
that they advise you on ways to use it.
Yep. The next section starts to cover things like evasion. So that is going to be your stat that you're going to be using for seeing if you get hit, essentially. So
AC from D&D.
AC from D&D becomes your evasion here. So that's what your game master is trying to hit to see if they hit you. Same thing if you're trying to hit something else. And then they also cover into hit points and damage thresholds. So this is the next big feature that is different than most other games out there. So you have your set hit points for your character. This is your actual life, though. So this is the actual amount of damage you could take before you are on the ground, either making choices about how you're going to keep your character around or not, or keep going. And then you have your damage thresholds, which are all based on your armor, except for in unarmored scenarios, which we did talk about this a little bit in the last one, which we're going to get to a little bit later in here. So there is some unarmored damage thresholds that are just based upon your level, basically. Yeah, and your tier, which is your level, essentially.
Yeah, and even with your regular damage thresholds. You're going to look at your base armor is going to give you, and then you add in every time you level up, you add a +1 to those. So you're essentially adding your level to your thresholds as well.
Yeah.
So even on what seems like a small level up, maybe you haven't gone up a tier and you're just, getting to pick a new card from, some of the new domain ones and simple things. At the very least, all your thresholds are going up too.
All your damage thresholds are going up by 1.
And we'll get to this too. And this is just a constant loop of going off the rails because we're very excited about this whole system.
Yeah.
Every time you level up, there are multiple pieces that are moving to make you more powerful.
Yeah.
And I love it.
Yeah.
Something really quick, just because I skipped over it when I mentioned the players get those duality dice. The GM is rolling a d20.
Yes. Yeah.
So for like, well, if the player, if the GM doesn't get duality dice, what do they roll? You're rolling a d20. That's it.
Yep, they're rolling a d20, which we'll go over again in chapter 3 because that one focuses
more
on
the game
around.
Masters.
Yeah,
but we're going to try to stay as focused as we can.
The next part is marking of hit points, where it talks about basically you have your 3 damage thresholds. So anything over severe damage is going to be 3 hit points. Major damage is 2. Minor damage will be 1. Anything below that, you just don't take hit points. So this is all based again on your armor, right? So each armor has like an armor class setting. So you have like 4. That means you have 4 armor slots to reduce your thresholds to keep yourself from taking hit point damage, essentially.
Yeah. So in with the whole like anything below the minor is basically it's like 0. Like it's 1. Is you take 1 damage, you're gonna be taken. Now if you take a minor and you use that armor slot, it brings it down to nothing. Also, if you have any other way, like an ability that you maybe roll a d4 or something and it subtracts from the damage, if it gets it to 0 or lower, also no damage. Now, something to keep in mind here, if you're coming from other tabletop systems, is your health. Your hit points might seem scarily low in Daggerheart if you have a total hit points of 5. For example, you're starting this game out. That's, if you're a wizard, I guess you're used to that in other systems. But so yeah, it won't be too different here. But yeah, like Richard just mentioned with the thresholds, at worst, if you're not using the optional rule of like the super mega damage, which is 4. So at worst in standard rules, you're only going to take 3. It doesn't matter if your game master hits you for 45 points of damage, which is 30 points over your severe. It's still just severe. So in that case, in standard gameplay, you're going to take 3 points, and if you have 5, well, guess what? Yeah, you're more than half down, but you're not out. And, that's a big hit. So
yes, it can still be a big hit. Now, there is an optional rule for the massive damage, which is not something that's in the regular rules. But if you are the type of GM that does want to really emphasize a mega hit that goes well over severe damage, then you can have stuff that marks off more hit points, essentially.
And I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of people use this.
Yeah.
I planned on it, but I don't think I will.
I'm not sure. I can see both sides of the argument. Is it really necessary? I don't think it's necessary, but I guess depending on like the kind of stress level you want in your campaign, if you want that looming over, then definitely go for it. Speaking of stress, the next section is covering stress. So your character has a set amount of stress that you have, and basically you'll be marking stress for a couple of different reasons. Sometimes it is because of an ability, right? So some abilities require stress to activate, like say a druid's shape that's not using hope. It's the hope feature. You can mark a stress to change into an animal. Sometimes it could be from that whole rolling with fear thing that we talked about. So the GM could decide that the complication is just stress. So you just mark a stress. And then sometimes there are adversaries and stuff like that that give stress. So like specific monsters that cause stress just being in presence, or abilities that they have that cause that. And then stress, essentially what happens is when you get down to where you can no longer take any more stress, you start to take hit point damage. So this is straight past shields, your armor and everything like that. If you cannot mark that stress, then you take damage instead.
Yes.
It should be worth noting that you can't opt into that damage. So it's forced in. So like if I have no more stress slots, as a druid, I can't take damage to become an animal.
Right.
But if an adversary forces me to take a stress, then I take that damage. So I'm sure there might be some instances where you probably can opt into stress for damage as like a move with your game master, right? It could be something that could be presented to you as an option, to make sure something succeeds. But they're like, it's not, you can't just do it innately.
Yeah. And what he's referencing is sometimes, if there's a move that you could theoretically make, but it's going to be really difficult. Instead of having you roll for it, your GM might give you the option and say, well, if you mark a stress,
Yes,
you can just do it. And then that would happen. Now, whether they can do that if they don't have stress points, that's going to be up to your GM.
yes.
Something else, totally just touch on this really quick. There are moves that can happen to you, especially, adversary moves, things like that, that will have you take multiple points of stress.
Mm-hmm.
Hypothetically, let's say you have 1 point of stress remaining, and I do a move to you that makes you take 3 points of stress. You're gonna lose that stress, and then you go straight to you don't have enough to take the 3. You're not gonna take 2 damage because of that 2 stress you weren't able to cover. You only take 1 damage. And that's how that is. If something were same situation, he took 5 stress, it's still just 1 damage. So no matter what, as soon as you run out of stress, it's 1 damage per instance that would give you stress.
Yeah. After stress, the next thing we get to is action rolls. So these are the rolls that you're probably going to be the most familiar with, because like the closest amalgamation would be skill checks in Dungeons and Dragons. But it's a lot simpler here because of the amount of traits that you pick from, essentially. So they cover this one in steps. So step 1 is picking a trait. So that would be picking the trait that applies to your action roll, which is going to be either suggested by you. In a lot of cases, sometimes players can come up with a trait that they think is applicable to the skill that they're trying to accomplish, or it might be something that is set by your game master. Either or.
That's how I've always liked to run, even in other systems. I will usually ask for a thing, but my players, I've made it very aware to them. If you have something you think fits the situation better,
you have an argument for it.
Absolutely. And
bring it
99% of the time, I'm going to take it.
Yeah. Step 2 is adding extra dice and modifiers. So this would be your modifiers would be like pluses from experience, or it could be advantage or disadvantage. And then rolling the dice to see what it is that you're getting on your totals, and then resolving the situation. So it's all pretty basic. I think the only real difference here is that there can be abilities and stuff like that can alter your dice rolls. Some of them have specifics on when they can happen. So sometimes there are abilities that take place before the dice roll and the outcome is predicted. And then there are some that are after. So you can see whether or not it was a success or a failure before adding the additional dice. So you always want to look at your ability that you're doing to see where you're at in that.
Yes, they do specify.
Yep.
All right. So that brings us a couple pages forward, which is cool.
Pages forward.
We're
making progress.
Here they give some example rolls and things like that, which, like we mentioned, great. Especially this section here, because they show you exactly an example for a situation of failing with fear, failure with hope, succeeding with fear, succeeding with hope, and a critical success. I really appreciate that because it's the same scenario and just how it plays out depending on the rolls. Awesome. Books do this always. Granted, rolls might not always be as complicated as they are in Daggerheart. Not saying Daggerheart's complicated, but there's so much variation with the duality dice.
Yeah, I was going to say I think this part is very important, these examples specifically here, and this is actually brought up again later on as well. And I think the reason why is because this is a lot different than other systems in that with this kind of a system, when you're rolling with a success and still having a complication, it could be something as easy as, you gain a stress from there. But that's not always going to be the default. You're not always just going to want to say, you roll with fear, take a stress.
No, you definitely don't, because stress is such a finite resource.
Yes.
You'd really be punishing your players.
You're really punishing your players if you do it like that. And also, there's just better narrative things to do. And it's going to happen more, right? Because of the fact that duality dice are the way that they are. So I like how they give you a lot of examples here and a lot of examples later of coming up with ways to flavor narratively these roles that you get, so that it's not just the same thing over and over again. Like, you roll with fear, I take my thing, you get a stress, my turn.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Yeah.
And I'm sure they mentioned at some point in this, Daggerheart's big on degrees of success.
Yes.
So even when you fail, but you just fail, or you succeed, but you like super succeed, there's gonna be variations on everything. They also go over that story is consequence. In Daggerheart, every time you roll the dice, the scene changes in some way. that line just sums up the whole thing.
Yeah.
Your GM isn't asking you to roll dice because we like the sounds of the pretty math rocks, which I mean,
we do.
Who doesn't, but that's not the only reason. It's also because there's weight to these rolls. Otherwise, we would be doing a. Oh God, I was trying to think of like an actual play that just narrates things, and I was about to throw World's Got a Number under the bus, but they are rolling dice as far as I'm aware. And though it does feel a really cool narrative. Love you, World's Got a Number. The whole thing here, I'm just trying to say in short, is you're not just making up a narrative and going back and forth around the table and telling a story, because that would be fun. But the rolling of the math rocks and getting low, this is a real thing, failing is so exciting sometimes.
Yeah.
Because when you succeed, you do what you wanted to do, and the GM gets to move the story forward. As a GM, I never want you guys to fail, because when you fail, I don't get to say the thing I planned on saying or whatever, because I just always expect you to succeed. And the story, I want you guys to win at the end of this whole thing. I want your characters to succeed and be the heroes and whatever. But when you fail, everyone at the table gets to be like, oh crap, what's about to happen, including me. I'm like, oh man, here we go. So failure's fun. And that's why story and dice rolls and everything has consequence. It's not just, all right, guys, let's sit together and, tell stories. It's, hey, the game has rules for a reason. Let's figure out what happens together.
Yep. You want me to go?
Yeah, you're really good at special action rolls.
All right, so we're at on to special action rolls, which are divided into a couple of different things here. Special action rolls. You have trait rolls, so those are your rolls that are calling for specific character traits. So pretty basic, same thing we already talked about. Attack rolls are the same thing, so they are attack rolls that are referencing the weapons that you're actually using. So this is in combat instead of just rolling for agility checks or whatever it may be. Then you have unarmed attack rolls, which is not using a weapon, which I actually like this because it's incredibly simple. It's simplest. It's the simplest it could be. It's just you make your attack and then it's 1d4 plus your tier.
It's per proficiency.
Per proficiency, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's so simple. I just like it. It's just very straightforward. Spellcasting rolls is again your spellcasting trait, which every spellcaster is going to have a different trait, which you'll see in the domain that you choose, right? So your spells are going to tell you what trait you're going to be rolling for your spellcasting. After that, you get to two of my favorite things. Group action rolls is one of my favorites. I love the way that they handle this. The first time we really saw this was in the Christmas episode. Where they did the stealth group action, and I was like, I love the way this actually works now with you have a leader, right, that makes the initial roll, and then everybody else is helping, and then for their successes, you get a +1 to add to the leader. For their failures, you get a -1.
Yep.
So it's not doing an average of the rolls or anything like that, which is what a lot of people end up doing. I like this system. I don't know what you think about it.
This helps us avoid the situation where the super mega sneaky rogue fails the stealth check because the paladin has disadvantage and -2 to
and -2,
stealth.
yeah.
It's because the paladin is probably, hypothetically, the paladin would, if we were to bring this to the other game, fail their roll for sure, right? Probably bad luck, average luck, either way, negatives, right? And then that's fine though, because if you were to translate the Daggerheart rules, that would just be a -1. Towards the final roll that the leader of the check is going to do. So your super sneaky character is still going to have the final roll and add or subtract, +1 or -1s based on the rest of the party's successes at making the same check. Now, the rest of the party isn't. This is where the duality system gets interesting, because they're not getting like hope if they get a critical success.
Yeah, no.
The rolling with the hope and the rolling with fear, it doesn't count in this instance.
Doesn't count in this case, yeah.
It's more of they use a reaction roll, which is where you can't put in use your experiences and things like that. You're really just using the applicable ability and rolling the dice and just seeing what you get. It's not as imperative like, oh, I roll with fear. It's fine. It's
yes.
For this instance, it's just a number.
Yep. Yeah, no, I like it. I think it's a really cool system. The next thing we have is the tag team, which does not cost each player to do. So this one is one player initiates the tag team, but you can only do it once per session, unless your specific classes have, the ability to do it more than once per session, or have it done
do it
more
once,
than
and
per
then
session.
there's also the ability to, if someone else initiates with
It's
you,
cheaper.
it's cheaper,
Yeah.
which is super cool.
So yeah, whoever initiates it is going to spend the 3 hope, right? And then you guys get to make your rolls together. So you both make a roll, and you can choose the better roll essentially, and then the damage dice get applied. So this is really fun, just because it allows for a lot of just truly collaborative efforts in combat for people to do things that you normally wouldn't think of or wouldn't be able to do in other systems, because it's just not narratively there, because of initiative systems, right? You're so far off from each other, you can't really, unless you hold an action, but then even then you're kind of just making stuff up on the fly. It's kind of hard to fit in sometimes, where I think it'll be a lot easier to do collaborative fighting with the new tag team system.
It's very powerful too, and which everyone likes. And one of the big things here is what I like is of being able to, it's not just choose the highest number, right? It's not automatically highest number goes.
Yes.
Because if you roll with hope, both players get hope. And if you roll with fear, the GM's going to get fear for each player. And, if it's like, okay, well, we rolled with fear and got a 24, we got a 19 with hope.
Yes.
Do you think that'll hit? And if it does, great.
That's
you
great.
both get hope. The GM doesn't get 2 fear. But what if it misses?
But maybe you need to take the hit
Right.
and give the GM the fear.
So I like that.
Which is cool. I like it a lot.
Or hey, you get a crit, just throw out confetti.
Yeah. It moves right into damage rolls, which are pretty straightforward. So damage rolls are going to be, we kind of touched on it with unarmed, but with weapons. So you have the actual dice that you're using, which then increases with proficiency. So multiple dice down the road, and calculating the damage. There's some interesting things in here. So it's pretty straightforward. You have your damage dice and you have your modifiers. Critical damage in this game is whatever the highest die roll that you could get, plus a roll of the dice again.
Yep.
Which is really
Plus your
cool.
modifier.
Plus your modifiers. I like that. And then the other key thing in here is multiple sources of damage. And this one's kind of important because of how some of these abilities work. And really what it does is it clarifies that if it's your turn as the PC and you're making a move and you're attacking something, and you do, like, say I, attack the goblin and I deal 24 damage, and then I use a class ability that allows me to, bite it and deal an additional 6 damage. All that is totaled into one attack that hits, that part.
You're adding to that 24 number.
24 number. It's
Maybe
not
now it's
2
28.
attacks now. You have to have a separate move for that stuff to be a completely separate thing.
Yes. This matters because of thresholds.
Yes, this matters because of thresholds specifically. So you got to keep that in mind.
Yep.
So it's very important that that's in there. Then you goes into damage types, which there is physical and magic. Very straightforward, which I know you have something about
excited.
that. So excited about that, right?
Yeah. This is the thing where I look at a game like Daggerheart, and the simplicity is so freeing that I don't have to focus on whether it's piercing, slashing, or bludgeoning damage.
Yeah.
I just have to know if it's physical or magic, because some creatures may be resistant or immune to one or the other. And that's important. But I don't have to track if it's like, the non-magical slashing damage. Like, what?
Yeah.
Like, no, it's one or the other, and you can flavor something. This is my real thing, right? So let's say I'm playing a wizard and I have like a scepter, right? And I follow very closely the goddess of the moon. I may not be, like the most devout, but I'm trying my best, and I've previously, gone to different religious hideaways. Those camp retreatments and stuff. You know how it is, the whole, like I said, I'm not as devout as it should be. I don't know what they call it, but have this like cool like half like lunar like scepter and stuff, and it does slashing damage instead of bludgeoning damage as any other walking stick would be in any other game. But I could just say it's slashing damage because it's sharp and whatever. And guess what? It doesn't matter in Daggerheart. It's physical. I could stab someone with a pokey end, and it's fine because it's physical damage. Doesn't matter. And I know I'm a wizard. I should be using magic. But if someone's in my face and the goblin's low in health, I'm gonna smack him like Rafiki. Like,
Smack him with a stick.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I love that.
No, it's nice. It's very clean. It's not overly complicated. It's just physical, magical damage.
Yes.
Done. Yeah. And then there's also direct damage, which goes past armor, right?
Yes.
So this is just stuff that immediately does damage and goes straight past your armor. So that's the thing that exists.
This is important. This is something like if you were to take adversary has a poison ability.
Poison condition or something like that. Yeah.
And it's just, hey, guess what? You take 6 direct damage and you look at your thresholds and you go, oof.
Yeah.
And you can't, what is the word I'm looking for? Negate that with your armor slots. Because guess what? You've already been poisoned. That's past your arm already, sucker.
And then you started to talk a little bit about it, but resistance and immunity do exist in here. So you have things like creatures or, PCs can be resistant to specific types, and they can have just straight up immunity to those types. So that does exist. So resistance and immunities are here, which we would expect.
Yeah. Of course.
Then we get into reaction rolls, which you kind of talked a little bit about before. So these are typically rolls that are going to happen in reaction to something. The biggest thing with reaction rolls, which you already said, is that you're not getting hope or fear from these. So these are just rolls that you have to make to see if you succeed or fail on something. But whether or not it's the hope or the fear in your lead die is kind of irrelevant here. So you're not gaining hope and you're not giving the GM fear for these.
Yep. And theater of the mind wise, it's just that moment where your character snap decision. You are just doing something reflexively, and that's why you can't, add your special things like experiences and stuff to it. It's just go. It's just go. Do it. And with resistances, immunities, we mentioned, you're not worried about the piercing, slashing, bludgeoning, whatever. You're also not worried about fire or ice.
Yeah.
It's just magic damage.
Just magic damage.
Point. So it's resistance or immunity of those two things. Less to track, easier for everybody. I like. Also allows significantly more flavor, because if something doesn't matter, you can flavor it however you want.
Yes.
Just stay within the confines of the rules that have been simplified.
And the last part of dice is going to be advantage and disadvantage. So a little bit different than what most games do, because like if you're in Dungeons and Dragons, you have a D20. Your advantage is just rolling 2 D20s.
Which still is if you're the GM.
Which is if you're the GM here. But as a player, you're rolling your duality dice, and instead of re-rolling other extra duality dice, you're just rolling D6s. So you're rolling a D6 for advantage and adding that. So that would be your modifier, or disadvantage. In this case, you're rolling that D6 and subtracting it from your thing. So I like the way that works. I think it's good. It's a good system rather than rolling a whole nother D12. I think would be crazy. But then also having to deal with which hope, fear, all that fun stuff. I like the way the advantage system works here.
Me too. Yeah. I like it more than I thought I was going to. Another thing that's different than the other system is you can stack in different directions. So just like the other one, if you have a source of advantage and disadvantage, they cancel each other out. You just roll your duality dice. But if you have 2 sources of advantage and 1 source of disadvantage, guess what? You still have advantage, because the 1 and 1 negate, and then you have 1 left over. Now you ask, what if I have 2 and no of the 1? No.
Yeah.
It's 1 or the other or nothing.
Or nothing. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's 2 positive and no negative is still just 1 positive.
Just still 1 positive.
But
which is fine.
It's still cool.
That's still fine.
There's those moments where, I'm getting help and something else is going for me and maybe something's holding me back, but I have enough going for me that I do have advantage in, mechanically and everything. It's all working out. I should have advantage on this. And, other systems, it might just, it doesn't matter. You had 1 of each, so now it's just nothing. I like that there's a situation, as rare as that might occur, that you would still be benefited or brought down,
Yeah. And the last thing that we have here after dice, before we get to domain cards, which I'll let you jump into, is a very small section called battling adversaries.
Oh my God, I almost missed it.
Yeah, it is super small because it's not really gone over in super depth here as much as it will be in the next chapter. Battling and fighting is more covered in the Game Masters section of chapter 3, more in depth than it is here in this specific section. But basically, battling adversaries, this little blurb just talks about the flow of combat as far as like what you can do, like as far as like simple moves, like moving within close range and making a standard attack, moving within close range and using an adversary's action, clearing conditions, sprinting across the battlefield to get somewhere if it's not somewhere where you can just move in and make an attack, like if you have to go a far distance, that sort of a thing. So it's a very small blurb because it gets covered more in depth later on.
Yep. And I'm glad it's here because when you get to chapter 3, it essentially tells you, hey, are you not going to run games? Are you just a player?
Yeah.
You don't have to read this. You're done with the entire
book.
You can just put the book back on the shelf and get ready to play Daggerheart, make character. Yeah, I'm glad this is here, like I said. And that fact that it shows the difference in a couple things here, right? So a player could sprint from, like a far range, make an agility roll, and if they succeed, still make it up and be able to do, their move, like make an attack or something. Whereas the GM, that is a move. No roll required, but it's a separate move. If they make that run, that sprint, and they want to attack you, they're going to have to use a fear.
Yeah, they're going to have to use fear
to get that an additional move. Yep. So I like that they actually point that out. Also, because, when we're talking about this first move, that's when it switches back to the GM because you missed an attack or you roll with fear or whatever. The clearing a condition doesn't have to be, I used fear to clear a condition, like a temporary. Can you make an adversary vulnerable, right? And if it says temporarily vulnerable, that means the GM has to use a GM move to remove.
To clear it.
Yes. And it could go to their turn and they just explain narratively how they remove that condition, and they basically could use their entire GM move that entire turn removing that condition, and then it goes right back to the players.
Yep.
Now if they wanted to throw down fear and go some more, of course they can, it's up to them, but I like that it's pointed out here. Like Richard mentioned, we're now to the domain cards. Speaking of things that separate Daggerheart from other systems, this is one of those things that in any other game would just be text blocks and abilities you could choose. And when you hit this level, choose from these abilities. And when you level up again, choose from these other abilities or one of these abilities. It's that, but way cooler because it's physical cards. You can hold them in your hands.
Yeah.
And when you're sitting at a table, if you share a domain, which every class in Daggerheart has 2 domains, and every class shares a domain with another class. So it's
always overlap.
It's always overlapped all the way around like a circle. If you think of like a star and the points of the star is the different classes, the little points in between those big points are all the domains.
And that star is in chapter 1. Yeah.
So here they go over the loadout in the vault. Loadout is essentially you can have up to 5 cards in your loadout. And the vault is your excess storage after that. At rest, you can pull out cards from your vault and throw it into your loadout and swap them back and forth sort of thing. They actually go into swapping right after discussing this. And one of the things here is cards have a recall cost. It can be as low as 0, I believe.
Yes, as low as
0. It goes up from there. And if you pay that recall cost at any point, this isn't like a move. This is, you don't roll dice to make this happen. You just do it. But add a stress cost. And that recall cost is directly correlated to stress. So if it costs you 2 stress to pull a card out of your vault, even you have the 2 stress to burn, because like Richard mentioned, you can't just go into your hit points. You mark off those 2 stress. You swap that card for a card already in your loadout, so you have to put one into the vault, and you bring it in immediately. And then you could use it. It is instant. So that's what that is there. They bring up adding tokens to cards. Some things, I can't remember off the top of my head the name of the dice. Prayer dice. You can you roll dice at the beginning of the day, and put those on your card. Use also other ones that will you get charges of like an ability or something, and you can put a little token on the card so you can track how many of those you have. They go over that too. Anything here on the domain cards I've missed?
No, that's pretty straightforward.
Okay. Conditions. There are some here. I want to be like, oh, they're not complicated.
No, they're all pretty straightforward.
The main things here, you really gotta you have hidden, you have restrained, you have vulnerable. Hidden is when you're out of sight of an adversary. When you're hidden, attacks against you have disadvantage, and if you're attacking someone before they see you, before you leave hidden, you have advantage on hitting them. I believe. Am I making that up?
No, you're not making it up.
I was gonna say, I'm looking at the thing here. I'm not seeing it, but I swear that's how it was. Maybe I don't know. Either way, at the very
least,
you're
thinking about rogues. That's what they do
specifically. Yes. Yeah. So, well, now I'm really wondering. Am I like if I'm another character, I'm not a rogue.
So when you're hidden, things are a disadvantage.
Disadvantage to hit you 100%.
Yes.
But do I have advantage to hit someone else?
So when you are a rogue, yes. If you are hidden,
but
you
not
have
other
advantage.
Classes?
And if you have
you sneak attack.
If you have an opponent near you, then you also have advantage, I believe. So yeah.
Okay. Restrained, because when you're rogue, it turns from hidden to like
there's cloaked and all that fun stuff. Yeah.
It gets extra wild. Restrained is even simpler. If you're restrained, you can't move until you clear the condition, and you can still do actions and stuff. You just can't move. Mm-hmm. Vulnerable is if you become vulnerable, the anyone attacking you has advantage on you.
Yep.
You have,
And same thing if your adversary that you're attacking is vulnerable.
You make an enemy adversary vulnerable, you've got advantage, so you're rolling that extra d6 to hit them. I believe if you, let me know if I'm wrong, if you run out of stress, you are vulnerable, correct?
Yes. Yeah. Like if you have no more stress, I believe you are vulnerable at that point.
We will get to that at some point.
We'll have to check.
But I believe that is the case because that sucks.
Yeah.
You really got to I think this is going to be a learning curve for players and GMs in this game is managing stress. It's like real life.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's while a currency that you shouldn't be afraid to use because it's going to power some of your most powerful, abilities.
Oh, absolutely.
Once you're there,
once you have no more stress, being vulnerable is huge. Plus, there's also that looming threat of just taking damage when something like an adversary applies stress to you. So, yep.
Yeah. So until we find otherwise, as far as hidden goes, I'm just going to say if you're hidden, they have disadvantage on hitting you.
Yeah.
If I see the whole advantage thing, I will point it out. But until then, ignore that part. There's also clearing conditions. So if this, like I said, if you're a GM and it's temporary, it's easy. You burn a fear or use your GM move to do it. If you are a player, you're going to make an action roll, and the GM is going to determine what is required, and that'll either be on the adversaries like stat blocks, where it'll be like, oh, to clear this, they'll have to roll this, or they'll just
go swimming and it washes off of you.
Sure, yeah, exactly. So that would be a good example of a special condition.
Yeah.
So yeah, some things, you've been sprayed with a funky odor and you got to take a tomato bath if you really want to get it off, or give it 3 long rests. Temporary effects, things like the Ranger's focus and things like that. Same thing. It's just that it can be removed. Countdowns is something that I thought was big in this game that I want to start using more often in other systems, which is basically where you take a dice, or you can write on your paper or whatever, just take a dice, and you put it on a number, and at some sort of trigger point, whether that be every action or every short rest or every time someone rolls a fear, you set up some sort of, can tell the players what it is. You don't have to. It can be a public countdown, but it doesn't have to be. You can have it behind the screen if you wish, depending on what's happening. And every time something happens that triggers the next countdown, you do so. And it's just a cool way to track moments. And it could be little things like every 3, player actions, the ground will tremor and a skeleton will crawl from the ground, and another adversary enters the battlefield. It could be big things where you have a D10, and over the course of the next 10 long rest, an enemy faction is moving closer and closer to your main city's hub, and there's going to be all-out war, and you've got 10 days to solve this whole thing, and there's this big narrative climax on the horizon. In our D&D game of Strahd right now, the wedding.
Oh yeah, we could have a countdown on that. We have a countdown. It's just days.
You've basically got one more long rest.
Yeah.
And then you're going to have to fight the titular Strahd in his curse. We also go into a big thing from Daggerheart. Daggerheart? Yeah, that's right. Is maps, range, and movement. Maps are entirely optional.
Yeah.
It's they basically are like, hey, this game is meant to just be kind of like loosey-goosey. You can theater the mind it, you can throw some stuff on the table, whatever. It's, range, yeah, there's melee, which is where you're like right up in someone's face. There's very close. You're in 5-10 feet away. 10 foot is like you're like 10 to 30 feet-ish. Yes, I know people do the whole this is a pencil's length, and this is the short end of a playing card, and this is a sheet of paper. And if you're doing the loosey-goosey on the table, throwing stuff around to be in the environment, that's how you're probably going to do it.
Yeah.
It's funny because there's also far, and then there's very far, and there's the out of range, which is just off the battle map. There's the people that are going to go very nitty-gritty and use the 1 inch by 1 inch grid, which they do break that down for you too.
Yes.
Melee is 1 square, so 5 feet. Very close is 3 squares, close is 6 squares. Far is 12 squares. Very far is 13 plus squares, and out of range is, like I said, off the battle map. I fully assume if I'm running a combat, it's either going to be theater of the mind or grid.
Yeah.
I don't know how often I'm going to just throw some stuff on the table and break out playing cards, a pencil, and a sheet of paper. Because even at that point, I'm going to just roll it theater of the mind anyway.
Yeah. And the last time that we played, we did have stuff on the table during one of the battles, but it was all very nebulous. It wasn't grid work. It was literally just stuff on the table.
It just gave everyone an idea of where...
Just to give you an idea where things are. Yeah. And then there are people that are going to play with the optional rules as far as like actual grids and stuff like that. And then there are already people out there that have designed things to work with this. The gentleman that I 3D printed the dagger from, Brad, also has files that you can download from there that are grid for the distances. So he has actual measuring sticks that you can use. So people are already making those too, if you wanted to get into the nitty gritty of it. But I don't think we'll probably ever get that deep into the weeds.
Well, I was going to say, it
just depends on how our combats go.
If we were to do the whole kind of like stuff's thrown on the table, I'm more likely to use something like that, like a community made measurement tool, than to break out my favorite number 2. And so yeah,
but yeah,
I don't know. Overall, I mean, I assume we're going to be a theater of the mind kind of table here, but
we'll see.
I get a lot of people aren't.
Yeah, a lot of people aren't.
So they also go into how movement works. If you're within like close range or stuff like that, you can close range. Melee range is already in someone's face, but if you're within that close, you can run up and close the distance. Thank you. And attack as part of one move. That is your one action. No roll required, anything like that. Farther than that, you're gonna have to do like agility rolls to run in. Depending, there are some ancestries and stuff that allow you to like get a little funky with like fawn and stuff. But for the most part, you're gonna make these agility rolls, run in and do an attack if you succeed. And if you fail, well, that's part of the moment. It's maybe you didn't realize the surface was as icy as it was.
Yeah,
maybe you stepped into like a bit of mud and it sucked you in a moment and you kind of lost your footing. You didn't quite make it there. Maybe an adversary, because you failed, which makes the GM gets their move now. Maybe they stop you halfway there. Another adversary closes the distance before you can make it to your intended target, and then they attack you or grapple you or something. And I like I wasn't sure how I was going to feel about how they handled movement as part of an action, because it's not, you don't have a movement action, bonus action sort of situation. It's you have a move.
Yeah. I like how streamlined and simple it is.
Aside from that, there's adversary movement, like I mentioned earlier. If you're going that far distance, they just do it, no roll required, but they don't get that attack afterwards. Unless they have like a special ability or something that mentions something specific. Targets and groups, there are abilities and attacks that offer the ability to hit multiple people in a certain range, like all adversaries within melee range of each other. Great. Things like that. Yeah, if you're targeting a group, and let's say you're spinning in a circle with your sword, and I can't remember the name of the ability, and
There's whirlwind.
is that it?
Yeah.
You make one roll, and that roll applies to everyone that's there. So if it's 17 to hit and it hits everybody there, great, you hit everybody there. You're not rolling like for every single person.
Yeah.
So yeah, you want to go and take the next one?
Yeah, so it goes right into cover and line of sight and darkness. So this is whether or not you can actually see something. It's very simple, whether or not you're, behind cover, or if you're actually so far behind that, it's not just a disadvantage roll, that you're just not being able to be targeted, period, versus, like your normal line of sight. Pretty straightforward stuff. Darkness can also make other things a little bit harder. So that would be, like the GM coming up with difficulty ratings for like how much harder it is to do something in like dim to dark, depending on the situation and your ancestry as well.
Yes, this isn't like hard and fast rules. This is just suggestions.
Is just kind of like suggestions. And then it moves into gold, which is another very simplified thing. Instead of dealing with individual gold coins, their base system deals with handfuls, bags, and chests, essentially. And they also do give some more guidelines later as far as like what certain things cost, as far as like, this kind of thing. You're not tracking down to the individual gold piece unless you want to. You totally can. If you want money to be more in depth in your system, by all means, but their base system just deals with it as in not having wealth per se, but just having enough money to get by for certain things.
Yeah.
And then using like larger wealth, as in like a chest of gold, to buy things like a rare magical item or something like that, instead of having to work out the details of who's going to pay for the inn and the stew for that night.
Yeah. And they point out like, hey, and if you've got more than a chest on you, you should probably figure out where to store it.
Yeah, you probably figure out where it's going to go.
It's hard to put that in your backpack. And it's 10 handfuls, is a bag. 10 bags is a chest.
Yep.
So it's simple. And if you do use that option rule, it's also simple. It's 10 gold coins is a handful. So.
Then it moves directly into downtime. So downtime is where you get into your short rests versus your long rests. So downtime is super important in this game because there's a lot of different stuff that you can do during your downtime. So short rests are tending to wounds. So that would be healing hit points, clearing stress, which is just that, clearing stress, repairing your armor. So that's fixing your armor slots that you used, and preparing. So this could be things like essentially how you prepare to gain back hope, essentially. So if you want more of that currency that you're spending to fuel your abilities. Then you have your long rest, which is tending to all wounds. So basically this allows you to clear all hit points instead of just, smaller number of hit points, clearing all stress instead of clearing a dice roll of stress, repairing all of your armor. Again, going into preparing. So this, you can be, multiple members of the thing, you each, gaining hope. And then working on projects, which is things like your countdowns. So this could be long-term goals, like maybe researching a magical artifact, or creating a new piece of armor, or trying to figure out a puzzle or something like that.
Yeah, this is a countdown I didn't mention, is that your players might be working on something. It might be emotional, because you can take permanent damage to your max hope in this game, for example. And one of the things you could be doing is trying to either go on a narrative journey or just an emotional one, and maybe you're trying to work on something to clear that, and get your hope back. You could be working on
it could be
armor
physical,
or weapon or some sort of other artifact, and it's going to take you so many nights to work on it, in successful nights even. And it could be something where, all right, well, I've got a D12, we're going to do a D12 countdown, and your players are going to roll for it, right? And if they miss, you need a 10, right? And you have degrees of, if a 10, great, you're going to move your countdown down 2. And if you get a 15, even better, it's going to move down 3. You get a 20, awesome, you're going to move it down 4. If you fail, you don't hit the 10, don't worry, it's still going to go down 1.
Yeah,
it's just going to take longer.
It's just going to take you a lot longer.
Yeah.
So that's kind of fun. I like that idea of working on projects. It gives you something to actually really work towards in your downtime, which is good. Also in your downtime, your GM is going to gain something.
I highlighted this.
Yeah, this is downtime consequences. So during that downtime, your GM is going to gain 1d4 fear. On a long rest, they're going to gain 1d4 plus the number of PCs in fear. So there's a lot of cool stuff that happens during downtime, but also that looming threat. Your GM is just stocking up on fear while you're resting.
Take as many short rests as you need.
Take as many as you need. Then you're also going to refresh cooldown features. So some classes and some ancestries have features that are only usable once per long rest, once per short rest, whatever it may be. So those will refresh, and that's includes your session features as well. So a lot of cool stuff that happens during downtime. I think it's going to happen a lot more than things like short rests happen in Dungeons and Dragons.
Really?
Yeah, I think so. And that's because of there's a lot of different things that you can do during your short rest as far as like tending to your armor as well as your mental well-being. There's a lot of really important things that happen during these downtimes that is not just hit points or key.
Yeah, I could definitely see players doing the max 3 short rests a day before doing the long rest.
Yeah.
In D&D, we've kind of just, you start to run out of hit dice and things like that. It's like, okay.
Yeah.
But here, like you mentioned, if you get the stress or the health back and stuff like that, you could definitely keep pushing.
Yeah, you can keep doing things.
So, yeah, especially there's no spell slots. You're not worried about that. As long as you can manage, the other resources, you're fine. I do like that they put a cap on 3 short rests a day.
Yes.
Or before you have to long rest. Otherwise, maybe you never sleep.
Yep.
You just keep pushing. Death moves and things like that. Death, it's a thing that comes for us all, especially our characters. Let's just get to it. So basically, if you're down to 0, right? There's no death saving throws, things like that. But when you're down, you're going to be given an option, and that is you can go out in a blaze of glory, which is where your player can say, "All right, guys, it's been real," and you just tell the GM, work with the GM to figure out what you want to do. It critically succeeds, and then you die.
Yeah, you're gone.
You're gone. You pass into the veil of death. But it could be really cool because it could be that critical last swing you need to take down the bad guy of the scene. And, you do it, you run them through, you take them out, I'm going down, you're going down with me sort of moment. And you get to have, a couple words with your party and then make your next character.
End it on a high point.
Yeah. You can also choose to avoid death. This is a choice I think a lot of people probably will do.
Yes.
Where you go unconscious. And while you're unconscious, you cannot move or act, of course. But you also can't be targeted, which I found interesting.
I think that's very important here.
So the GM can't just be like, well, I'm going to walk up and stab you.
Yeah, exactly. It's once you're basically effectively removed from the scene.
Yes.
Is what happens here, which I think is very important because that means that there's a lot more agency in being able to say, I don't want my character to die.
Yeah.
I'm going to take the negative, but I'm removed from the scene.
Right. Now, a fellow player could still run up and heal you.
Yes.
If they give you back at least 1 hit point, you can come back in. But aside from that, you're the GM, you're gone to them. Mm-hmm. You are cloaked. You're invisible. You're hidden. So if another player comes up and they give you back a marked hit point, or if they finish a long rest, then you'll come back. After your character falls unconscious, roll your hope die. If its value is equal to or under your character's level, they gain a scar. That, and why I read it very specifically word for word, is very important.
Yes.
Because when you gain a scar, which, you remember how I mentioned you can lose access to hope slots? That's that.
Yes.
You just cross off a hope slot, and that's gone to you, which in a long campaign is bad because some of your best moves are powered by how much hope you have.
Yep.
And it's just symbolizing that your character's running out of hope.
Yeah.
Like it's such a cool thematic thing.
It's a very cool and thematic thing, and it's not an end all be all. Obviously, there are ways to talk with your GM to think about removing scars, and the scars can be anything from it's really kind of up to your creativity. This could be emotional scars, it could be actual physical scars. Like something as simple as in like you have a damaged leg now, and you might spend long rest working on the project of rehabilitating your leg to eventually remove that scar and be able to be at full capacity again. Or it could be something so bad that you will never recover that hope.
And, if you're going to start losing access to some abilities and things like that, it really just narratively might get to the point where your character feels the need to just put down the sword and retire. Yeah. And that's fine. That's like narratively, some people are very upset with this. I personally think it's kind of cool.
Yeah, I like the system.
If I've been beaten down enough times and I've done my part, and I feel sorry guys, I don't have it in me anymore.
Yeah, I like character flaws. So the system that allows the act of a death or avoiding a death results in a character flaw, I think is great. Cool.
I like we get into the specifics again. If its value is equal to or under your character level, they gain a scar.
Yeah.
So the higher level, the longer you've been an adventurer, the more likely it is you're going to get that
you're
scar.
going to get that scar.
You're fresh, springy, full of youth and excitement, the world, ready to be an adventurer. You bounce back easier than ever. And
just like babies and they're not breaking bones.
They just
bouncy and bendy.
Yeah, bouncy and bendy. That's what they say. You can also choose to risk it all. This is the third death move you can choose. Risk it all is for the gamblers amongst us. I know some people, one of our New York friends would do this every time. Every single time. YOLO, as they say. You roll your duality dice. If the hope die is higher, guess what? You're good to go. Your character stays on their feet and clears an amount of hit points or stress or equal to the value of hope die. You can divide it however you want, right? So you roll that hope die, it's higher, great. You rolled an 11, now you've got 11 points. You can distribute between, your hit points and your stress, however you want to do. If your fear die is higher, you dead.
Yeah, you're dead.
You cross.
Talk with your GM how you're gonna make your exit stage left.
Fail of death is crossed.
Yeah.
If you critically succeed, guess what? You bounce up and your hit points and stress cleared. Just get your brand new character ready to go. Woo! Long rested in the moment.
Yeah.
I say long rest. You're not getting certain abilities or whatever back, but hit points and stress, good to go. This is the ultimate gamble.
Yes. Yeah. It really is. It's just all on the dice at that point. It's
that crazy thing of like, if you include the fact that you can crit, it is technically more likely that you succeed in this, because you're either going to roll with hope, or you're going to crit. But if you don't,
then it's just done.
It's over.
Yeah, it's game over.
You didn't get that free critical success. You didn't get to continue the game, but you just have a scar. None of that stuff. You are just gone.
Yeah.
And I like it.
I like it.
Resurrection is possible. This is another thing they point out right after death moves and stuff. The resurrection spell is available from the Splendor Domain at level 10. So we're talking the highest level spells in the game. So, hey, that's a thing someday. So maybe that's a cool thing where, like, at the end of a story, after you've brought down the evil guy and you save the world, maybe you bring back that party member who fell along the way and, cool story beat or something. Or the GM might come up with a cool resurrection narrative thing for you to do. If you've got a player that is really attached to a character, they don't want to move on. Richard really, really, really likes his robot Seraph that he promised us all he'd play, and he passed on, unfortunately, and he really wants to play him some more. Well, maybe we get the spare parts together and find a little spark of his soul somewhere, and we put it all back together. And maybe he's not the way he once was before, but he's back. Cool that it's a possibility. They don't just rule it out entirely.
Yeah, the next section we have is additional rules. So these are just additional things that are kind of from all over the book. Rounding up is the first one. So the game doesn't use fractions, so you round up whenever necessary. The next one is re-rolling dice. Basically just states that if you're re-rolling dice, you are taking the new result.
I do have to get used to the rounding up.
Yeah, the rounding up.
I round down in D&D.
No,
So
rounding
now we
up.
got to round up.
This is positive system, rounding up.
Well, I tried to be nice to you guys by rounding down.
Well, it depends.
But now I got to round up.
But yeah,
Sorry.
re-rolling dice, always taking the actual one. So that's very, very important. Incoming damage. So when a feature refers to incoming damage, it's the damage that amount of target is currently receiving. So it's just clarification on what that incoming damage is. Simultaneous stacking effects. So this is if you have multiple effects that are happening. So if I, as a player, have multiple different effects that I'm stacking up, they're my effects. I choose the order that they go in.
Yes.
Which is cool.
Yep.
So that's neat.
So it's basically, if he has one, if he does an ability and, you know, something from that gives him a hope, but something else he's doing at the same time costs
a hope.
He can choose to spend the hope that he is getting.
Yeah, because I'm getting a hope and I'm spending the hope.
So he does it in that order.
Yep. Then you have ongoing spell effects. So basically, it is spells that don't mention something. It continues until the PC or the GM ends it. So this just kind of gives you the rules to know when things can end if they don't have a very specific. Then you have spending resources. So this just talks about being able to do things like spending your hope.
Yep.
So this major clarification is really for things like how to use hope to stack things. So like you can use hope to use an ability multiple times, but in some cases cannot use like the same hope ability to just keep adding more numbers to a dice roll. So you can't just like start burning like 2 hope, and adding all these pluses to it.
Yeah.
But there are some abilities that allow you to use your hope feature more than once. And then you have using features after a roll. So this is what we talked about earlier, which is using some features after the roll has been declared. So whether or not it's been declared a success or a failure, and then you can use a feature that goes on after effect.
Yep, the feature will let you know if you can.
Yep. And then ending a scene, so deciding basically when a scene is going to end at the GM's discretion, usually to tell you when a scene is over, which then affects a lot of different things like effects again. So when effects wear off or when certain things happen, or depending upon when that scene ends.
Is the combat over?
Yeah. Is the combat over or are we away from the debutante ball now? Is that scene done with?
It could be as simple as, you know, maybe there's a couple of skeleton minions left, but you kill the big skeleton and the other two, you don't have to role play out how you come out and you slaughter every last one of them. I just tell you, you guys clean them up with ease, or they run away into the night.
Yeah, and then end scene.
Yep. And then free flow, everything's back at your discretion.
The next section is players' best practices. So these are just things to keep in mind as a player when you are playing this game. The first one is embracing danger, which we kind of touched on a little bit, which is always don't be scared about failing and always embrace the danger. Take the risk, as risks is fun, and risk gives you great narrative opportunities.
Use your resources.
This is a big one.
This is your hope.
Don't hoard your hope. Use your hope. As a GM, don't hoard your fear too much either. Use your fear.
And if you do hoard it with intention.
Hoard it with intention. Yeah. So using your resources is hugely important. The next one is telling a story. And that's like kind of the heart and soul of this game.
Yes.
Telling a story. So make sure that your actions are pushing a narrative. They're doing something. You're not just doing things to make numbers on the page go up. You're telling a story, a collaborative story with your friends. If you're playing Daggerheart, you already know this because that's why you're here.
Yeah.
That's why you're here. And discovering your character goes along with this, which is knowing and being able to look at a character and know that you don't know everything about your character from the jump. Yeah, you have their backstory, they're your character, but there is a lot to discover about your character and grow with your character as you tell the story with your friends around the table.
I think this is one of the truest things. One of my favorite parts about tabletop games like this is starting a game and planning on being like, oh, I'm just going to be the kind of funny, like meme goofball character.
Yeah.
And by the end of it, you've made like very serious emotional attachments to your fellow PCs and you've gone through an entire character arc and you're like, how did I get here?
Yeah. Or as a character, fundamental beliefs shift and change.
Absolutely.
Like I have character in Strahd that has changed in attitude throughout the entire campaign, and it has changed them as they were originally designed. They are a completely different person now than they were on day one.
Yep.
So
and
discover your character.
Yeah, let that happen. Like don't be, closed off to the fact that it might not go the way you originally planned. With some of the things in this game, like setting up, what's the word I'm looking for? I can't think of it. When you're setting up your character and you're going over with each other, you can go back and forth on, hey, your character stole something from me one night. What was it? And you're like, oh, well, I didn't plan on stealing anything from anyone's character in the middle of the night, but
sure,
why not? And you're like, oh, I stole you had a little beanbag in your backpack. I took it. And you're like, I didn't think you would notice, but I just wanted the thrill of taking something. I needed to do something, keep my, I just needed some like normalcy back in my life. And I grew up on the streets always taking things, and I don't trust people. I don't have friends. And it's like you start to spiral into a narrative that maybe wasn't something you planned for at all. But hey, and then guess what? Now you have a thing on you that other character had. If they ever find out you took it from them, maybe they've been looking for it. It belonged to their grandfather's favorite beanbag. And you're just, I don't know, man. It's just cool. Yeah. Let your characters develop. Next, we have leveling up. This is, like we mentioned earlier, every level feels important in this game. Big thing here is tiers of play. This sounded complicated to me at first because there's 4 different tiers, and I was like, okay, all right, I need like a rhyme to remember when all these tiers change. Because at level 1, you're at tier 1, but then quickly you go to level 2, so it's 2 at 2. No, it is level 1 is 1, and then the other tiers are just 3 levels each.
Yeah, just 3 levels each.
So tier 1 is level 1, tier 2 is 2, 3, 4, tier 3 is 5, 6, 7, and tier 4 is 8, 9, and 10. Mm-hmm. It's super
straightforward.
Simple. It's very straightforward. Like I mentioned, every time you level up, make sure you're increasing those thresholds. Don't forget, it's very important. Your GM may even forget when you're making characters. At level 1, if your armor says what your thresholds are, don't forget to add a +1 to all those. Don't let your GM forget. I'm sure it's on accident. They also bring up level achievements. When your character levels up, first take any level achievements that they have earned. This is basically, if you look on your character sheet at the different tiers, there are little achievement things you can mark and stuff. Actually, I'm skipping around a bit. You gain different experiences and things. The modifiers, everything goes up. +1 your proficiencies. You go through all that. It just runs you through all that. Your advancements is what I was really referencing.
Yeah.
This is where at every level up, you go down below and you get to check off 2 at your discretion little advancements. And this is where you can customize your character a little bit more. Mm-hmm. You can, if it's just a regular, like normal lined box, you can, it's just 1 per. So you could go through and you permanently gain a bonus to your evasion. And then you could gain a bonus to an unmarked permanently gain a hit point slot, something like that. But once you've checked it, it stays checked.
Yeah,
you can't choose that again in your next level up. At higher tiers, there are ones that are thick bordered, mm-hmm. like dark, like black, such as increasing proficiency by 1 or multiclassing. Those you have to mark both boxes. That takes both of your 2 options for that level up.
Yep.
Here also, when you get to multiclassing, if you choose to multiclass, you can just scratch off one of the other things, which is an upgraded subclass card. And because it's just can't get that anymore, because you can instead at level 5 or before you multiclass, choose to upgrade from your foundation ability for your class into expertise or into not expertise. Or mastery, or
there's specialization.
Specialization. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yep. So you have your foundation, your specialization, and your mastery, and you can choose those. But if you choose those, you're not going to be able to multi-class.
Yeah.
And if you multi-class, you can't choose those.
Yeah.
So you got to decide whether you're going to stick with your class and really double down and focus in on it, or if you want to spread the love a little bit.
Yeah, I do want to touch really quick on the advancement section. I love the way that it's laid out because it gives you a lot more agency of developing your character in a specific direction that you want to go versus just, oh, I got a new level, I get a new spell slot, I get these new spells, I get a new ability every 2 levels. You know what I mean? This gives you a little bit more to be able to really kind of make a character your own and kind of hone it in the way that you want it to be and the way you want to play.
Yeah.
I like it.
The thing I kind of glanced over when I was talking about the level achievements, because I was skipping ahead to the advancements. At level 2, you're going to get an additional experience.
Yes.
Like you made the 2 experiences at level 1 when you're making your character. This is another +2 modifier experience. You're going to do that. You're also going to get a +1 permanent bonus to your proficiency, which is great. Remember, proficiency matters a ton. That is when
damage dice.
your damage and things like that. If it says D6, it means proficiency D6. So if your proficiency is a 3, well, guess what? You're only 3d6 for that ability, and every time your proficiency goes up, you're going to, roll more dice. So high proficiency is good. Level 5, you get an additional experience, also a +2. You get another bonus to proficiency, and you clear any marks on each character trait that you previously increased and marked, allowing you to increase those traits again. It's the same thing when you get to level 8. Why that matters is because on your advancements, there are one of the very first ones at the top that you can check 3 times is gain a +1 bonus to 2 unmarked character traits. That is your agility and things like that. So once you get that bonus and you mark that, you can't increase that again until you hit the next tier.
Yep.
So yeah, that's what it means when it says clear it. You're just going back and on the actual character sheet itself, marking that, clearing that so you can increase it again. Yep. Damage thresholds, we've gone over a couple times. Level up. Guess what? Every single time you level up, get ready to erase your thresholds and increase them by 1. Again. Yep. Taking domain cards. So the last thing you're going to do at your character level up is you're going to take a new domain card out of your domain, domains available to you, and at your level or lower. So when you level up, guess what? You've got some new ones that are available to you. You don't have to take those, though.
No, you can keep going at the lower level ones.
Exactly.
Yeah. Which there are some really good low-level domain cards, especially if you're spreading between your 2 domains and you're not picking a specific one.
Yes.
Could be good.
All right, I'm going to read this bit verbatim. Starting at level 5, this is multiclassing. You can choose multiclassing, an option when leveling up. When you multiclass, you get to choose an additional class, select one domain from that class, and gain access to that class feature. So you're going to choose one of their 2 domains, and you get the class feature immediately. Take the appropriate multi-class module and add it to the right side of your character sheet, then choose a foundation card from your subclass choice. If that foundation card has a spellcast trait on it, you can choose to use that trait when making a spellcast roll, or use the spellcast trait from your original subclass. So if you didn't have a spellcast trait before, you do now. And if you had one before, choose which one you want to use.
Choose which one.
This is interesting because it also, if you gain a spellcast trait, that'll allow you to use magic weapons now when you couldn't before if you didn't have a spellcast trait. If you did not previously have a spellcast trait, blah, 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 blah. Yeah. So, main thing I want to get at here, and specifically because they bring up beast forms as a thing here. So, here we go. You know what? Let's dub into this text again. This helps in my argument. Choose a domain from your new class that you don't already have access to moving forward. Whenever you get to choose domain cards, you can choose from the cards that match your additional domain at half your current level rounded up. This means a level 5 wizard who decided to multiclass into druid and chooses the sage domain could choose any sage domain card level 3 or lower. That's that whole rounding up thing. Any attacks, spells, or moves used while multiclassing are always performed at your current level. So if you're level 5, guess what? You're still level 5. For example, a level 7 wizard who multiclasses into a druid can use the tier 3 beast form options because they're, it's level 7, they're tier 3. If you move, all right, I'm just gonna stop there. This is dumb. I've seen some people on the Reddits where I lurk speaking about
So
this
you
as
don't
well,
like it because your beast form is high right off the jump?
I don't like it because it gives access to the high tier beast forms to non thoroughbred druids. is the crappiest way I can put it. It's a situation where you've got some, not because they're strong. I understand they're balancing the game, and druids and beast forms in general are pretty strong. But it feels like it takes away from the high tier druid abilities. They're like, oh, I've been a druid for 10 levels. Look at what I could train into like animal gods. And the like warriors like, me too. And you're like, homie, you just went druid recently. What do you mean? And I'm gonna double call out here. On r/Daggerheart, Derpy de Foolin brought up a point that Derek from the YouTube channel Knights of the Last Call brought up during a live stream, that they suggested that tier 3 and 4 beast forms should not be unlocked until you unlock the specialization and mastery features of the druid. So you would unlock tier 3 when you unlock specialization, and you get tier 4 when you get the mastery of the druid. And considering the mastery and specialization are available to you at tiers, 3 and 4, I fully agree with this. And that would make it to where those really cool tier 3 and tier 4 beast forms are unique to the druids, the masters of their druidic craft. And it does not lock out, some still very viable beast forms from characters that have dipped into it or dipped away from it when they've given up on their druidic, like, oh, I've decided to focus in on being a seraph or a wizard, and then maybe I don't know, on a narrative sense in role playing, I just like that a full-on druid can do the craziest stuff with their transformations instead of someone that's just kind of druid.
Yeah.
Thoughts?
I can get behind it. I think it gets a little bit difficult because you're talking about their main feature, like their main class feature, being able to change into beast forms,
which you'd still be able to do.
Yeah, which you'd still be able to do. I think the reason why they didn't change it was because it was a blanket thing across all classes, right? So you're not locking out like the rogues class features or the seraphs class features or whatever those may be. I think it just
those aren't stronger
as
tiers.
Strong as, I guess,
there's not like a tier
like
4
the druids. Yeah,
like cloaking, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
I see why they did it, because they probably just didn't even consider the fact that, like, thematically speaking,
you're taking away
from druids slightly. I wouldn't be mad about it if it was the way that people are suggesting. I think I would be perfectly fine with that. Yeah, I don't know. I do wonder if they're going to change that.
So I don't have I can't do it in a direct quote because I don't have it in front of me, but people have brought up certain builds, like warrior builds, where if you're a warrior, because the beast forms are just bonus, like add on +6 to your evasion and plus this to this, that a warrior druid multiclass is so much stronger in beast form than any druid could ever be.
Yeah.
Because of just where the warrior, ability bonuses already are, and then they're just enhanced by the druid.
Yeah.
Whereas a full druid to a full warrior, the stat bonuses are balanced to each other, and the multiclassing just makes it so funky. And it's give and take though, because also that may be true. So a warrior druid in its beast form might be the most powerful form of that druid beast form. Yeah,
but they're not really the most powerful druid, because druids aren't just a beast form in a vacuum.
Right.
They have other abilities and spells and everything like that.
But beast forms are so good.
As the same thing, you could be a druid that is a higher level that dips into warrior for their mastery features. And, they're kind of also getting some bonuses there too. Maybe not the same tier levels, but I mean, it's kind of a give and take. I can definitely see a world in which they do change this though, and go with the the Reddit suggested as far as like the tier
I think it's
restrictions.
simple.
Yeah, I think it's a simple
It's
change.
a very simple change.
Yeah.
And it allows Druid to keep, what's the word I'm looking for? Not the nature of their class, but,
Yeah.
their
And
identity.
I do wonder. So on paper, yes, this is like a whole thing. This is like a side tangent. Is that
We're all about side tangents.
I do wonder how big of a deal this actually is for the crowd that's going to be playing Daggerheart.
What do you mean?
Because I don't see Daggerheart as attracting the meta numbers game people as heavily as something like a Dungeons and Dragons or a Pathfinder game.
But that's why I think they should change it.
And yeah, that's what I'm saying though. I don't see it like I see the people that are going to play this game of a different class of player that are probably not going to do a thing just because it's better in the meta numbers. They're going to do a thing because it's thematic. And there's going to be people that are going to do it. Yeah, but I think it's going to happen less than it would be in a Pathfinder or a Dungeons and Dragons or like a Flames of Freedom, which is going to be like crazy number
not the
crunchy.
Call out I expected.
Yeah, I mean like that's just very number crunchy stuff versus a game like this where it may not come in to play as much as it would in other games.
Yeah.
But I could support the change of that. I definitely I see the merits in that.
Yeah. All right. So we're about half an hour into recording and about halfway through the chapter. So off we go.
So the next couple of sections are actually stuff that we're not going to be going deep diving into because we're getting into the equipment sections.
Yes.
So we're not going to go through every single piece of equipment in here as far as like weapons and the different tiers and armors. We're eventually going to do that. We're going to do a deep dive into equipment.
Yep.
But for today, we're not going to go over every single item and everything like that. So these next couple of pages after like the openers
should speed up a little bit.
Are going to go a little bit quicker. But basically, it jumps into our equipment section of things. So that's the equipping, storing, and switching equipment. So you have your inventory weapons. So this is going to be the actual stuff that you're starting the game with, whether they be your primary weapons or your secondary weapons, how to switch them, and then also switching of armor. So this is a big one because we talked about this a little bit the other day. Yeah, because we were talking about like, well, if I have 2 sets of armor, right? So, did you say you saw a Reddit thread where somebody was like, "Can I have 2 sets of armor?"
No, this was just Tyler thread.
This was Tyler thread. Okay, this was internal
clarification from the book. So some of the things here, like inventorying your weapons, right? So you get your starting equipment, and then you can have 2 additional weapons, primary, secondary, or any combination of. So you can have additional weapons on you. Great. It does limit you though, which I like. So you don't have 1,000 weapons on you. You can switch weapons if the situation you're in is not dire or anything like that, calm situation.
Yeah, you can just do it.
Switch weapons. That's fine. Or you can mark a stress to do it in a dangerous situation like combat. You can switch from a weapon in your inventory to your active weapon. Active weapon is what matters here.
Yes.
Because that is, if the weapon gives you abilities or anything like that, it's going to come from your active weapon. Switching armor is a thing you can do in safe situations.
Yeah.
Armor has, those armor slots we've mentioned. Those armor slots that you're marking, you're essentially damaging the armor. If you take off that armor, you throw it on the ground, and you put on some nice brand new armor, you clear those armor slots. This is new armor. That other armor slot, you got to remember what that is. If you give it to a party member or something that's still damaged,
it's still damaged. But if it's repaired,
yeah, exactly. The big thing here is that they don't allow you to carry extra armor slots in your inventory.
You can't just have extra armor hanging out.
Yes, maybe back at home base or something, or if you buy a new set, sure, you can swap it out if you have the time to do that. But at that point, you could spend that time repairing your armor or something. And, yes, you can switch, and if you do, if it's good armor, guess what? It's good armor. But you can't just have a second set in your back pocket, and then you're like, oh wait, whoop, and then you're back to full. Yeah.
Then you go into the using of weapons. So your weapons fall into your main categories, which you kind of already covered. You have your primary weapons, and you have your secondary weapons. So your secondary are ancillary stuff, like it could be like a shield, or it could be like a grappler, or like another dagger or rapier or something like that.
Yes, so usually you'll be using a secondary weapon if your primary is a one-handed.
Yes, if it's a one-handed. If it's not, then your secondary weapon could just be something that you have hanging out that you could be using in like specific situations, or in the case of like losing a
I've
primary
got a whip
or something like that.
just in case.
Oh, whip just in case. There's also throwing weapons. So these are weapons that you could throw. So this could be, you know, your dagger or your axes are the two examples they give you here. That you can throw. Important thing, if it's not a magic weapon that comes back to you, you got to go get it. If you throw it. So it doesn't just come back.
If you're throwing it, you're going to be using finesse, even if it's if you use a normal trait typically. Throwing is going to be finesse, and then like Rich said, go pick that thing up.
And then the next section here is breaking down how you're going to read the equipment lists that you see here. So you have your weapons. So weapons is broken down into pretty standard stuff. So you have your name of your weapon, which is what it's going to be. The example they give you here is broadsword. They're going to give you the trait. So that is the trait that you're going to be using when you attack with that weapon. So if it's an agility-based weapon, you're using your agility trait to attack with it. Range is going to be its range. So be that melee or, you know, like actual, like far, very far.
If it says far, it's far or closer. So it's whatever the range is and closer.
And then closer. The damage is going to be what the actual dice that you're rolling. And then whether or not it's, you know, physical or magical or whatever.
And then if it says like +3, then it's a +3.
Then that's the modifier that goes on there. The important thing to remember here is that die increases with your level.
Proficiency.
Your proficiency is what that is. So if it says D8 and your proficiency is 2, that means 2D8 for that weapon. The burden is how many hands it takes to wield it. So is it a one-handed weapon? Is it a two-handed weapon?
This is it warrior? I can't remember off the top of my head. We just talked about it last episode. But there's a class, you know, ability that makes it to where you ignore burden.
Yes, you ignore burden.
And so you could take take a two-handed weapon and hold it in one hand, which is cool because just like a great sword or whatever in one hand, and then a tower shield in the other, or I don't know, sword in each hand. I don't care. Whatever. Let's get creative.
And then you have a feature which not every weapon has. Some weapons don't have a feature. They just are what they are, but then sometimes they do. Sometimes this feature can be a positive, so like something like reliable, which gives you a +1 to a roll. Sometimes a feature can be a negative because it's something that is particularly not easy to wield, so it may do something like hit your evasion.
Or, something like a greatsword actually gives you 1 negative to your evasion.
So it could be something like that. And then with armor, same thing. You have the name, so it tells you what the name of the armor is. Then you have your base thresholds. So these are the thresholds that are going to go onto your character sheet, like Tyler mentioned earlier. Remember to add proficiency to that again.
Yes, even at level 1, if it says 715, that's really 816.
That's really 816. So you got to remember that. So those are your base thresholds that you have while you have it equipped. Then you have the base score. So that's the number of armor slots that you have. So make sure to mark that on your sheet as well. And then again, you have features. So again, features can be positives, they can be negatives. So in the case of the example they give you here is chainmail is heavy, so it's a -1 to your evasion. And then in armor, they also go over how to use your armor. So they talk about reduction of damage, and that is the usage of armor slots to remove but take the threshold down a tick when you take that damage. So if you use your armor slot, it allows you to take that severe damage and make it major damage, or that major damage and make it minor damage.
Or minor to
nothing.
Yes. Another thing to note here is if you are out of armor slots, you're out of armor slots. You can't reduce that anymore. But your thresholds don't go away. So your armor still functions even if you're out of armor slots.
But your thresholds still remain.
Correct.
And then again, we get into this thing we kind of touched on earlier, which is they cover unarmored in here, which we'll go over that really quick, which is going unarmored. Doesn't give you any bonuses or penalties, but while you're unarmored, you have an armor score of 0, so you can't use armor because you're not wearing any armor. They don't exist. And then your major threshold is equal to your level, and your severe threshold is equal to twice your level. So you're not completely exposed, but you're pretty exposed.
Yeah, exactly.
And then there's reflavoring of armor. So just like with anything in this game, flavoring can be done, and it's cool and fun.
Anything you want it to be.
Anything you want it to be.
As long as, within reason, and just know that, like, it doesn't matter how cool and fancy and, you describe your armor to be, it still is what it is. So, if you take that chainmail and you describe how it's made of
maybe it's not chain.
It's not chainmail. It's made of silvered snakes that are alive and writhing across my body. Well, the thresholds are still going to be base 7 and 15. if it's made of cool, moving, sentient, silvered snakes or chainmail. It's the same armor.
It's just flavoring for the sake of making it fun.
You can make it go with every now and then if you want, but
every time you get hit, snake, I'm a snake.
I'm a slippery snake. Armor slots is just snakes sacrificing themselves. Droves.
After that, we get into the actual tables that we're not going to read, but they are organized by tier. So you have tiers. So like when you get to the weapons, you have tier 1 magic and physical. And then you get to your tier 2 magic and physical, tier 3 magic and physical, tier 4 magic and physical. So you have all these different things. And of course, they get crazier and crazier as you go.
Yes.
There are some really cool ones in here that do some really interesting things like hammers that hit everybody when you hit one person, and really just neat stuff like that, which we look forward to actually going through at a later date.
Yes, we will do a deep dive on weapons and armor at some point.
And then the last part is for
weapons.
For weapons is combat wheelchairs, which is really cool. So they've included 3 different tiers of wheelchairs in this game. So that's light frame, heavy frame, and arcane frames. And these are for characters that are in a wheelchair. And they actually go through a couple different things in here, which is the action and movement. So they even give you examples of how to act your character, like how to talk about your character.
How would you describe
instead of saying I walk up to
stuff?
this thing, I roll up to this and do here, or I wheel myself over this small gap, to do whatever I may do. So there's stuff in there. There's also consequences in here, which are ways that you can basically describe complications that you might encounter being in a wheelchair. And then there's also evasion. So your character is just assumed to be, skilled in it. And as a result, their wheelchair gives a penalty.
Only if it's
the heaviest frame model, but the others don't, because it's assumed that you know how to operate them. Burden is interesting because it talks about the burden of using wheelchairs, which outside of combat, there really isn't one. You're just assumed to be efficient in using your wheelchair.
Burden is one-handed or two-handed.
One-handed versus two-handed. But then when you get into combat, you have the one-handed, which would be your light frames, but your heavy frames are two-handed. So that's a little bit different because you have to remember, these are combat wheelchairs.
These are weapons.
So these are weapons.
Yes.
Yeah. So
they have a range.
The heavy has ranges
and
damage dice, and the heavy has higher damage dice than the light frame models. And arcanes deal with like distance. So you can have crossbows and magic shooting out of your wheelchair and stuff like that. A lot of different options in here. There's basically, what is it? I think it's 4 wheelchairs per tier.
Yes.
Which is really cool. So there's just a lot of options for wheelchairs, and the arcane ones are crazy because you get into like weird tiger-legged walking wheelchairs instead of having
they
wheels.
have like examples and stuff for some of these, and they show Dracona in your typical like fantasy styled battle chair, and he's got a hand crossbow in one hand, and then you go to a heavy frame wheelchair and he's sitting there and it's all super armored up, and then you go to the arcane and it's literally
an old man sitting on a stuffed tiger.
It's so cool.
It's neat. Then you have your secondary weapon tables. So this is just going to go over the secondary stuff. So this is going to be things like your shields or your whips, which I love.
Daggers, short swords,
Yep.
hand crossbows. It's the smaller, less impactful weapons. But just because it's less impactful doesn't mean it's not impactful. A lot of these have abilities and features that augment your style of play or even your primary weapon. For example, the small dagger. If it's a D8 physical damage by itself, but it paired, so it's a +2 to primary weapon damage to targets within melee range. So if you get into a combat and you've got weapon in one hand and you have this dagger and this small dagger in your second hand, you're not rolling to attack with this second dagger, but thematically you're getting that hit in because you're getting a bonus because of having this dagger, the second dagger on you. So I like that a lot. Same with, when you have your shields and stuff, that's adding on your armor bonus and things. Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting thing of note here,
Yes.
which I didn't really notice until now. There is no physical and magic tables for secondary weapons. They are just singular ones. And there are indeed some magical secondary weapons in here, like the returning axe is in tier 2. So that would be 2 to 4. So it is interesting that there are no separate physical and magical tables here. So they are all physical, even though some of these are...
Yeah. Well, say the returning axe is physical.
Is interestingly things like you have
so there's
when
no
you get to
magic
level 10,
secondaries.
there's no magical secondaries, but you have things like, you know, a primer shard at level 10, which is an instinct close weapon that has like lock-on attacks and stuff like that, and it's like basically a magical gem.
So you think some of these like should have been like a magical...
These are things that are implied to be slightly magical, but
magical by nature, but
they're
not
magical by nature,
damage.
but not magical by damage, which is just an interesting thing of note.
I get it. I mean, you know what? You know, a returning axe, at the end of the day, it's just an axe. It just comes back to me.
Comes back to you.
Hey,
that's
you
shit
know?
like a boomerang.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you can flavor anything you want.
Yeah.
Guess what? It's a boomerang.
Flavor it.
Let's say it's not already a boomerang, right? Am I missing the boomerang? Armor, we're talking like the same idea here, right? You got your, you know, tier 1 through 4. The higher you go, the cooler it is. We'll go over the tier 1s really quick because this is the one everyone's going to choose from starting out. You've got your gambeson armor, your leather armor, your chainmail, and your full plate. Every step of the way, your base threshold for, you know, the lowest, you know, is you're going to be, your major goes from 5, 6, 7, or 8, and then your severe is 11, 13, 15, 17. So it's like a very like steady step on that first one. The second one jumps up a little bit, +2 on each step up. Your base score for the first 2 is a 3, 4 slots for the second 2, and then the features is where you really break out the, you know, some of the other stuff here. So your gambeson somehow actually makes you more evasive than wearing no armor at all.
Absolutely.
Is a +1. I am faster. Richard explains it better.
It's not about speed, because he brought this up earlier today, and I was like, no, you have to think of it differently, because if you are fighting me and I am not wearing a shirt, it's going to be easier for you to stab me,
to damage you of some sort.
Of some sort. Now, if you come at me and I'm wearing a nice flowing gambeson, right? You can't tell. Like, no, think about it. If you like look at
it's like a padded,
but look at the picture. So you, at the bottom of the gambeson, you have like some fabric, right? If you're trying to
nice
gut stab me, right? And I'm not wearing a shirt, my gut's just there. You can see it, especially if I'm turning to the side. That's just nothing but beer belly. You're just going to ram it right in there. Now, if I have like a nice big XXL shirt on, maybe it's shirt, maybe it's gut. You don't know.
It's hard to tell.
It's hard to tell at that point. So when you go to stab, you might get nothing but shirt.
Yeah, nothing but shirt.
So that +1 evasion,
thanks, gambeson.
Yeah, is hiding my belly.
It's okay.
So yeah, so that's the argument there.
There's your +1.
That's the +1.
Because it's so flexible.
Yeah. Leather armor is just too tight, though. You don't get nothing.
It's no bonus.
Yeah,
It's
there's
just
no
flat.
bonus there. It's just flat.
Chainmail's got its heavy, like we mentioned earlier. It's that -1 to evasion. The full plate, though, that thing, you are really committing to always being hit and
always being hit.
Just, you know, negating everything because you're getting a -2 to your evasion and a -1 to your agility. So at that point, it's not just coming after, you know, your evasion, it's coming after a trait. So this is going to affect, you know, more than just, you know, whether you get hit, if it's something that requires an agility roll, right? So yeah, big deal here. And you're going to see things like that throughout all of the armors. Some of them just getting even crazier though, right? All the way down to things like fortified, which is when you mark an armor slot, you reduce the severity of an attack by 2 thresholds instead of 1. That is a full fortified armor down on tier 4. So there's some pretty cool stuff in here.
Not to mention the base thresholds for that fortified armor are 1540.
Yeah.
So in addition to just being a massively high threshold, you're also lowering it by multiples. So yeah, there's some really cool stuff when you get to the higher tiers.
I love that the major is still like obtainable. And it's kind of that throughout most of the high tier armors. Because of 15, hey, you know, it's 15's 15. Oh, 40 though. Could you imagine if you played with that optional rule? You need an 80.
Yeah, you need an 80
to do that massive
insane
damage.
Yeah.
Yeah. After that, another area we're going to have to skip over today. Let us know if you want us to double down on this one later. We will. But otherwise, this might just be, you know, tables you want to look into yourself whenever you're looking through the book. You got loot. So you've got different items here, and there's tables you can roll on. for common, uncommon, rare, and legendary. I like that it's all sequential.
Yes.
Based on rarity.
That's what I was going to bring
just
up.
Add in D12s based on how rare something is.
Yeah, because they've just made the list as rare as it is. So like their list is just what it is. It goes up to 60. And then the amount of D12s that you're rolling is getting you access to those at the at the higher end, I guess you say. So at your 60 end.
It's wild too, though, right? Because all right, let's skip ahead of this a bit. 60. What's in theory one of the highest tier things you can get is the Belt of Unity. Once per session, you can spend 5 hope to lead a tag team roll with 3 PCs instead of 2. It's amazing.
That's cool.
That is rolling all 5 of your D12s and getting a 12 on all of them.
Yeah.
So this is what I was about to get to is you're rolling for this, right? And you got to be in these scenarios where there's the possibility of finding this legendary tier loot, for example, which the game describes as a situation where you might find something that's one of a kind, or reward for an incredibly difficult or dangerous job, or a powerful adversary's most precious and guarded treasure. And your GM's going to take 5 D12 and they're going to roll them, and they might get a total of 5 because they got all ones.
Yeah.
And in that case, guess what? You're getting a common item. But hey, there's a chance.
Yeah, there's a chance. But it also is at the GM's discretion. If you're, as a GM, you decide that they need a Belt of Unity, you could just give them a Belt of Unity.
100%. You don't have to roll for it.
You don't have to roll for it.
I would like to roll for it.
But I like rolling for things.
I like rolling for things. It's real cool.
Yeah.
Consumables, very same situation.
Yep. Yeah, very same situation.
Even more so of being able to just like, hey, go in a shop and you're going to find some of these things for sure.
Yeah. Which is cool though, because you can either like that's a good thing to bring up too, because you can either have somebody roll on consumables to see what the reward is. As a GM, if you don't know what's in a shop, you could roll on this table and just have that be what's in the shop.
Yep.
So you can decide the rarity level that you want for a specific
what's
shop.
The rarity level of your shop?
They have a single legendary item in this shop. And then you roll, and then if it is a legendary item, it is. Or guess what? They sold it last week. It's just a stress potion.
They're. Oh, I mean, you could even bring. Oh, I had a blinding orb, but I had it stolen from me yesterday. And maybe they'll. Oh, that's cool. And then if they run into bandits or something later on in the adventure, and they find a blinding orb on them, it's kind of a callback. And then the players are going to have a thing of, well, do we keep this?
Yeah.
Do we return it? We know who the owner is. And it's its own little thing right there.
Yep. There is a slight blurb at the end of consumables about using consumables, which is just to state that traditionally using a consumable typically does not require a roll unless it's stated in the actual writing of that.
Yeah.
So some things do require a roll, but most of them are just you use them. And then under certain circumstances, the GM might have you make an action roll to use a consumable, even if it isn't like noted in the description. And that might be like specific use case scenarios, like knowing how to use an item, for example, versus, like knowing it because you do it every single day.
Yeah.
Like drinking a potion versus using an artifact of some sort.
Other blurb that's kind of actually towards the beginning of the consumable section is it points out that you can only hold up to 5 of each consumable at a time. So we kind of mentioned at the top of this show, like the whole video game nature of some people.
Yeah.
And like,
hoarding things.
13 health potions just in case we need them at the final. No, you can only have 5. So if you're hitting 3 or 4, hey, guess what? Maybe time to start handing them out to other players, or maybe time to start using them.
Yeah.
So that's just, hey, another point of clarification. I'm glad to throw it in. This is a section I actually considered at one point going through and like figuring out who's going to role play each character. And there's a full example of play that they throw in here.
Yeah, this is when we went back to examples before of like things that they include in here.
That were like smaller examples.
Smaller examples. This is an extreme
4
example.
Whole pages.
Yes. Of an entire example of play.
Yes, it is awesome. It's amazing. I'm glad it's here. They actually reference it there's a questions for GMs we'll get to in a second, and they reference it in there, and I love that they do. So I don't know, should we do like a TikTok or something? Like, I don't know, we don't do the whole short form content usually, but it'd be funny to like actually go through and do this at some point.
We'll have to brainstorm this one to see, but it's very cool. I like it. I like it. It's really
Page 134
good.
Of the Daggerheart core rulebook, if you're wondering what we're talking about.
It's going to be super helpful for new game masters, I
Yes.
think. Incredibly helpful because it really gives you an idea of what's going to happen or what could happen at a table. And it has some real world scenarios in here about what you're supposed to do in the flow of play.
It's just reading an actual play.
Yes, you're reading an actual play.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What you mentioned there, this is the biggest thing for me. And you mentioned it's helpful for GMs. They break down at the end right here. They say questions for GMs to consider. And they go through and they ask things like, here's an example. This is from the book. Stella allowed Rune to make 2 jumps using the arcane door spell rather than making him roll for each casting, which is what you traditionally do. When a character is using an ability like that, do you want a call for a roll for each use, or to let one roll represent chaining the ability a couple of times like Stella did? Stella, of course, didn't follow the letter of the rules and was like, you know what? You do it a couple times, that's fine. They rolled the once, but you could, that's multiple moves, have them roll multiple times. How would you do it as a GM?
Yeah.
And I love the thought-provoking nature of this because at the very end of this, they kind of surmise it really well. As you consider your answer to these questions and make rulings during game, you'll develop your own GM style. That's the key point to take away from this. There is no right answer. It all comes down to your group and what creates the best experience at your table. Your GM style might even change over time, and that's all right too. Next up is chapter 3, blah, 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 blah. That doesn't matter. But hey, guess what? We made it to the end of chapter 2.
Hey.
But yeah, no, I love this. And I highly encourage anyone, especially if you're going to be running games, but not necessarily, even if you're going to be a player, to read this. Because it helps you put yourself in the mindset of why your GM might make calls one way or the other.
Yes, why they're doing what they're doing. If
you disagree with something, take a step back and be like, okay, well, maybe this is why. And this is their GM style. And at the end of the day, if you butt heads with your GM style, often, maybe it's not the right table for you. But if you can kind of learn to like work within the way they run games, because they're trying to run a fun game for you, and you're trying to play a fun game and be a considerate player, at their table and stuff too. This is cool. And it also points out that GMs are tracking so many things.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's this whole thing is just very well done, and it's the perfect bit. The fact that it's 4 pages is insane. It's the perfect bit to have at the end of chapter 2, because it summarizes everything that you've gone through, even down to putting in play things like, oh, does a 13 hit? And you think to yourself, okay, well, my evasion is a 14, so no, that doesn't hit. And all right, well, this is 12, and all right, that's a major damage, so I'm going to use an armor slot to bring that down to minor. And it puts into play everything you just learned.
Yes, everything that you just learned.
But yeah, that's my take on that. Any closing thoughts on any of this stuff for chapter 2?
No, I think everything is really good. I think this is a good, concise way to clean up the chapter and end it, and kind of highlights again the idea that the flow of play can be a little bit more freeform than what people are used to seeing, and that it's a little bit more open to interpretation based on keeping the game fun and engaging for all the players at the table, which I love that.
I was going to say, of all games to be fun and engaging for all players, I think Daggerheart's the one, man.
Yeah.
At any moment, it could be your turn. Or at any moment, it could be the GM's turn.
Yeah.
Just keep you on your toes the whole time. But yeah, anything we got wrong, anything you've got comments or anything on, please leave those down in, the comments. Nice. Everyone's been there lately. It's awesome. Glad to hear from all of you, especially when you're pointing out how wrong Richard is. It makes me feel good about myself. It doesn't happen that often. But when it does happen, I'm never going to let him forgive it. Positive affirmations, those help keep the lanterns lit. If you are on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, any of those podcast services, 5 stars, pretty cool, If you're on YouTube, smash that like, subscribe. I don't know which one you're supposed to smash.
Both of them. And the bell.
Smash the bell?
Smash that bell.
You don't got to hit the bell. Just set an alarm on your phone for every Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern. It'll get you there too. But algorithm stuff, sure, whatever. Richard's probably better at this than I am. But until then, everyone, I have been Tyler.
And I have been Richard.
And we've been
True Strike.
Bye.
See ya.
Hey, adventurers. Thanks again for joining us today. Please be sure to give us a follow on your favorite podcasting platforms and YouTube. If there's any questions you'd like to write into the show, you can hit us up on Threads, Blue Sky, or Instagram. New episodes release every Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern. Thank you for listening to True Strike.
Strike.